Hello, and welcome to the Biology Buzz podcast. I am your host, Michaela, and with me today is Dr. Amanda Rosenberger, a professor here at Tennessee Tech.
Hi.
Hello. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you very much. Enjoying the spring weather.
Yes. I thought it was supposed to be warmer now, but then I go outside and it's
In the
still
morning.
kind of cold.
In the morning.
But then it warms up very fast.
It does, and it was a really nice walk over from Pennebaker.
Oh yeah. I love that building.
I don't.
I love it because
I'm
of
ready for a new
how
one.
chaotic it is.
It is a little bit on the chaotic side. We did have an alarm today, so.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I wasn't there thankfully, but yeah, sounds like some fun drills.
Yeah. Well, it's the nature of the beast when you work on a campus that's been here for a while. There's always a balance of new and old.
That's true. There's some haunting going around.
Somebody stuck with the old buildings.
Yeah.
Might as well be us. It's fine. I could put cartoons on my door.
That's
Nobody
true.
cares.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I know that you have taught some. I'm gonna make sure I remember this. Some aquatic landscape ecology classes, and you deal with fisheries along with ecology.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, kind of, what all the classes do you offer and what you teach, and also how you got into fisheries, because I know there's a lot of professors around here who deal with fisheries, but I don't necessarily know how they got into it.
Absolutely. Well, my position is actually a federal position. I'm a USGS biologist. I work with the Cooperative Research Unit in Fisheries here at Tennessee Tech.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's really fun. I'm very lucky. It's almost entirely focused on research. And, me and Mark Rogers, who is the chief of our fisheries unit, he and I both do research for the state with the idea of enhancing our ability to conserve our natural resources and to manage our natural resources. And while we're doing it, because we're located on a university campus, we simultaneously train the next generation of natural resource professionals. So almost all of the research that we do is tied in with students and student research, sometimes with postdocs, sometimes with research associates. But in every case, there's some sort of training component to it. And our idea is to raise those students and those associates up to the point where they can then populate the natural resource management community.
That's so cool. Okay.
Yeah, so I do teach classes, but it's very important for me to be a supplement to research on campus rather than take away any of the opportunities or roles that regular faculty have. So we are really intended as a supplement. So the classes that I teach are graduate level classes only. I don't teach any undergraduate level classes. It's part of our cooperative agreement that I cannot teach undergrads primarily, though I do welcome undergraduates to take my classes as a independent study or something like that if they're interested. But the classes that I teach are malacology, which I teach in the fall. I've been teaching it every other year. I think I'm going to teach it again this fall, and change which years I'm alternating it so that I don't conflict with fish ecology that Kit Wheeler teaches.
Yeah.
So I'm teaching that class in the fall, and so that's the study of freshwater mussels. And then I'm also teaching a class on professional development for master's and PhD students. So I sort of start with teaching them about the graduate school and the research process, and then move into leadership training and sort of all the things that I wish I was taught in graduate school that I wasn't taught on professional development. We get into how to find a job, interviews, CV writing, all that sort of thing. I do resume and how to find a job workshops regularly for undergrads and graduates.
Okay.
Often as a guest lecturer here, or I'll teach workshops in conferences and things like that. I've taught an aquatic landscape ecology class. Brad Cohen and I co-taught a class once, and now he's pretty much doing his own thing, but I hope using the material that I gave him. Other than that, I don't do a lot of teaching. Mostly what I do is research. And the research that I do is focused on aquatic landscape ecology, fish ecology, and mussel ecology at the moment. So I'm mostly in conservation biology, so I work a lot with endangered species.
That's what I want to do. That's my dream, is to work with endangered animals, but I want to do more so aquatic and marine life kind of conservation
Conservation
biology,
Mm-hmm.
because so this was a question for later, but like my favorite animal is a whale shark, and I just love the species of sharks.
Mm-hmm.
I love them, but I also love all the other ones. Like I love jellyfish, I love stingrays. I have a tattoo, actually. I just got a tattoo Sunday of stingrays.
Oh, wonderful.
I know, I love it. And I love aquatic life in general. And it's not just, for marine biology, for me, it's not just the animals, but it's also learning about the, like, life of, marine life, the, like, plants that are in there, what's endangered and what's not. And I want to be an advocate for like these endangered animals and bring more light into them. Be like, hey guys, like these animals are endangered. Let's do something about it. That's
everything.
what I love. And I know some professors here deal with like not controversy. They deal with what's the word?
Conservation biology?
Yes, I'm horrible with that word. Like I'm so bad at saying that word. But they deal with that, and they also deal with there's one, I think it's Dr. Gunderson who teaches a marine biology class.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. That class is so hard to get into, I swear.
I'm sure it's very popular.
I tried so hard this past semester because it's only offered in the springtime, but it's every other year. And so my only other time to take it will be my senior year, my last semester of senior year. So I'm hoping and praying to God that I get into the class, because that would just be, I would love it. Like, I would just I'll be so happy if I have no other class but his. Like, that'd be so cool.
Well, when you work on endangered species, one of the things to keep in mind is that endangerment of animals is not evenly distributed across the planet.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I work on aquatic ecology is that our rivers and streams have the highest rate of endangerment of animals on the planet.
For sure.
So our freshwater fish, our crayfish, our mussels, and our freshwater snails are among the most endangered on the planet. And of course we have other animals that are sort of prone towards being endangered, like elasmobranch sharks and rays, because of their low fecundity, their vulnerability to fishing, their high predator status. There's a lot of things that sort of come together that can create a situation where human interference can be a particular problem for them.
Yeah.
So it is really important when you're doing research in conservation that you combine what you do with education and outreach and awareness.
Yeah.
I think that's it's a good thing to be a representative for animals that can't speak for themselves. And in the case of the animals I work on, they often don't even really have vocal cords or ears or mouths.
They like
they
literally can't.
They have mouths, but they literally poop out of their mouths. So it's really, they're not very.
They don't have much to really say.
They're not very sexy. So I have to give them some advocacy, because the fact that they're, especially with mussels, that they're
and
rocks.
They're not like the popular ones either.
No.
So no one really.
They're just
tends
rocks
to care.
with a little bit of snot in the middle.
Yeah.
They're a little snot sandwich. And so they don't get, they can get a really bad rap, but they're absolutely essential part of our riverine ecosystems.
Yeah, for
They're natural water filters. They create more productive aquatic communities. They enhance fisheries as well as water quality. They are culturally extremely important. So you've heard of the gold rush.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the pearl rush? So the pearl rush is very similar to the gold rush in that it actually has affected where communities are in the southeast.
Okay.
And when they came into place was largely to harvest mussels and mussel shells for pearls. And we also have, along lots of our larger river systems, you might find a shell with what looks very strange, but these perfectly shaped holes in them. Okay. And those perfectly shaped holes are button blanks, and that is how we used to make buttons.
Oh,
so we over-harvested mussels, in fact, to fuel the button industry in the 1800s and early 1900s, and only when we switched over to plastic did we stop doing that. And we've also harvested mussels as a way to seed the pearl culture industry. So when you think about the little bit of sand that you put inside an oyster to make the oyster grow the pearl, well, it's not really sand, it's actually a shell that's been sanded down to a perfect sphere, mother of pearl, from our own freshwater mussels.
That's so fascinating.
So they used to use that. Now they have come up with other technologies for doing that.
Yeah.
But for quite a while, it was a very lucrative industry,
Yeah.
and it wasn't all legal. So there's some very interesting stories, sort of Wild West kind of stories about mussels that you would never know. They were used as food by Indians as well. So, and as for Native Americans for cultural purposes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a huge, rich history with these animals that go far back before colonial times, where we used them for industry and things like that. That some of which we've retained, some of which we've lost, but they are part of our natural legacy as Tennesseans and as part of this country. And the other thing that I try to remind folks is that mussels are, for Tennessee, a really unique natural heritage that we have, because we have more species here than we do in any other part of the world. Mm-hmm. And there's very few organisms for which you could say that, because the tropics usually have us beat. Not when it comes to mussels. When it comes to mussels, we have more than even South America. The entire, South American continent does not rival little Tennessee, little Alabama, in terms of the number of species of mussels. So that is really exciting when you think about how diverse and how unique that is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you don't think of Tennessee as sort of a biodiversity hotspot. You don't. But it is. It's a biodiversity hotspot, not just for mussels, but for fish, for snails, for aquatic animals of all kinds, salamanders. So it spans taxonomic boundaries, and there's lots of reasons for that, but the main thing to keep in mind is that's part of our natural legacy, and that's what makes this work so important to do here.
That's so cool.
So even though you're not next to your favorite marine animals, if you want to go into conservation biology, and you're just interested in management and conservation biology and endangered animals, there's no better place than Tennessee to be, because we have a lot of them.
That's true. And that's one thing I do like about Tennessee, because a lot of people will get onto me and be like, why are you here if you're trying to do marine biology? And I'm just like, well, it's not just marine biology. And plus, one, of course, tech is, cheaper for me because it's in-state, so that's one of my main reasons. But I still have been able to, have my hands-on experience with a lot of different things, including in labs. And again, I'm a sophomore, so I still have 2 more years of being able to go to different classes and being able to have more biology classes. And so there's just so much more that I have yet to discover that is still going to be able to help me throughout my time. And right now I work with HERT, and we do a research on the DNA in honey with honeybees. And so that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, but it's also because I've worked with honeybees before. So it's a field that I'm already knowledgeable in, and coming to time whenever I can find something else that probably will be better for me, I'll just keep going on with that.
Yeah, and those skills are very transferable. Everything that you learn in Dr. Hart's lab on DNA extraction, genetics, things like that, all of that stuff applies to so many different situations, and those are essential tools that we use in ecology as well as systematics and everything. And they're it's the building blocks of biology. So I don't think that there's any problem with going to a school that may not be immediately. As long as you keep in mind that a lot of those skills are transferable and a lot of those things can be applied outside of that. So I'm glad you're getting that research experience.
That's
I am
too.
Exciting. Also, as a sophomore, a lot of students don't start thinking about that until their junior or senior year. And I always advise students, after you have decided on your major,
just go for it.
Unless it's absolutely necessary for your sustenance in life, no more hamburger flipping, no more fast food, no more retail. It's time to move into your field and start getting that baseline experience. I don't want our biology or fisheries graduate to gut a fish one day and decide that they're yucky.
Yeah,
and I've already gotten his degree in fisheries. I mean, we can think they're yucky, but yucky, and I don't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. I'd rather them have that hands-on experience so that they know that it's the right field for them. And there's certain things that you can only get in a laboratory or out in the field in terms of learning experiences that can't be duplicated in a classroom. So it's really, really important for anybody interested in biology to immediately seek opportunities in their field as much as they possibly can. I often have undergraduates work for my graduate students and undergraduates work in my lab. So although I don't teach undergraduate level classes, I said, I still work with them. They're still an essential part of my program, and is still a very essential part of being here as a USGS scientist. So I really enjoy it. So and giving students those experiences really fun.
And we said this, or you said this a little bit earlier, but I love the fact that you're also a female in fisheries and ecology, because I'm not one of those like really, I'm not like a big feminist or anything, but I do love being able to see other women in the line of work of biology when it comes to like fisheries, because that's one main thing that like you see a lot of men in, and including the fisheries club that we have here at Tech. Pretty sure most of them are like men. I know there's like a couple of girls, but I love being able to see other women taking charge in like different biology departments that you wouldn't think we would be interested in, just because of like, I guess, how more manly it feels, you know, because you don't see a lot of like for the hobbies, you know, how you see guys sports like they're fishing for sport. You don't see like a lot of girls doing it, but whenever you do, you're like, yes, ma'am.
They're driven. They are driven.
Yes, and I love that about you and like for you.
Yeah, it's when I first started as a fisheries biologist, and it wasn't really until I moved on from my degree in biology, and my master's degree was in zoology, that I went in and started my PhD, that I got into fisheries, which is more just applied fisheries biology.
Yeah.
So it was centered around management and conservation, and that I realized how much of a minority women were. I would go to Southern Division American Fisheries Society meetings, and there would only be one or two senior level scientists that were women. And as graduate students, that we were a greater population. And of course, I've seen that change through the years, where women are much more common. But I did mention, you know, it's like there is this notion of belonging that can be difficult for anybody who is a minority in their field, and so it's important to have those people representing and as examples, and not to have it be a liability as well.
Yeah.
So lifting each other up as women scientists is an important thing to do, and just lifting each other up in general, I think is really important. One of the things that fisheries is lagging terribly behind on is having minority and BIPOC members of our community as part of our fisheries culture. Okay. And there's lots of reasons for that. Representation is one. Some very, very negative history around being in wild environments and being in rural environments and being a minority person and having that be dangerous. And there's also a tendency for land-grant universities to be primarily rural in nature. And a lot of our land-grant universities are what hold our fisheries and conservation biology programs. So there's sort of just a historical layover that has led to that. So one of the things that I work really hard on is trying to increase diversity of fisheries students and increase the accessibility of the fisheries degree for those students who may not come from the kind of background where it's considered traditional or it's considered a natural way to go. Like you said, it's sort of like one of those fields where people are like, how did you get into this? Like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And you have to say, well, I mean, there isn't a CSI fisheries. I mean, there are, I mean, it's just not a career that people generally think of.
Yeah, no.
Unless you might think of a game warden or something like that, so you might think of it as a law enforcement thing, but of course that's only a small component of what we do as fisheries and fisheries biologists and natural resource biologists. Yeah. I got into it because I was one of those kids who was really into dinosaurs, and I just never got over it. That's what I tell people.
That's like, how my sister is.
Yeah, always kind of a weirdo, and I followed that nerdy path pretty much from the very beginning. And when I went to my undergraduate school in Massachusetts, one of the faculty there was a fisheries biologist. Okay. And so I started going out in the field when I was 16, and of course I was immediately hooked.
Oh, that's so cool! I love that you're able to have that like early on as well, because I haven't had much like experience with being able to do that unless it was for a club called FFA in high school. I was like as much hands-on as I got to any animals, unless it was like animal shelters. But I love being able to like hear about other people who get to have these hands-ons whenever they're like really young, because it helps to build that path for you.
It really does, and it also sort of demystifies it. Yeah. And makes it accessible, and I think that's a really important part of what I have to do as a biologist whenever I have any chance to sort of take away the mystery and make it seem like anybody can do it, because it is something that, you know, we should all somewhat familiar with the natural world, we are part of.
Yeah.
Right? And but when you study an obscure animal that's really exciting and that nobody really understands,
yeah,
and you find out that it has one of the coolest life histories ever and the coolest adaptations ever, which I'll be happy to tell you about. You just have to ask. And you get to share that with people. I sort of equate it to, imagine that the natural world is a large castle at Disney World. And there are tours that go through the castle, and they go through every part of Disney World. And you have access to a secret compartment or secret passageway, and you get to take an elite group of people to go see this little treasure trove in this secret passageway, and you just want to take everybody to see it because it's really cool. And that's how it feels when I get to share, what is unique and neat about Tennessee's river systems and the ecology of these systems. Like, guys, come look at this. This is really cool. You may just pass over this bridge
and not think anything
and
about
see
it.
Duck River. What's Duck River? And I have to say, the Duck River is one of the most important rivers in the United States. It has the highest diversity of fish and mussel species per river mile in any place in the temperate world.
Yeah,
in the temperate world.
And a lot of people are like, okay.
It's right there.
And it's like, no, you don't understand, though.
It's a really, really unique and exciting system. And it's right in your backyard. It's a true treasure. And it's like, for people who study what I study, it would be like an art history person going to see the Mona Lisa. It is that level of special and unique and important. And so being able to share that with people is really fun. And what makes mussels cool is they have a really complex life history. You like bees.
For sure.
You like pollinators. Okay, well, if you're a mussel and your babies just kind of come out and they're not really like mobile, they're just going to end up going downstream, right? So how do you, as a shelled organism, solve that problem? You want your babies to go both upstream and downstream. Okay. How do you solve that problem when you have a mostly sessile adult life stage? You hitch a ride.
Okay.
So they hitch a ride on fish.
That's so interesting.
It's really cool. So, and if you want to hitch a ride on a fish, maybe you should attract that fish to you. So a lot of mussels have lures that look like fish, so they'll attract bass. Yeah. They're better anglers than we are. They have, they package up their babies in little packages that look like worms, insects, so that the fish will eat them and think that's dinner, and then get a mouthful of babies instead. And they have little mucus nets that they pull out, and you can imagine you as a fish walking through or swimming through a spider web.
Oh yeah.
And then you end up with babies on you like that. So it depends on which species you're talking about, but each species has its own sort of life history and own unique ways of going about hitching a ride on a fish. Yeah. There are some that will literally capture a fish like a Venus flytrap.
Okay.
And just give it a little hug, a little squeeze, inject it with baby juice, and then let it go. And then the babies will hang on for anywhere between a few days to several weeks. It depends on the species again. Oh. Some of them are very complex. Some of them are less so. And after they drop off, then hopefully they drop off in a good spot and they grow and they become the full adult mussel. But that is how you can solve a problem as a freshwater organism.
Be a hitchhiker.
How do I deal? I don't want all my babies to go in one direction. If I do that, you know, I'm going to be in trouble. They have very unique ways of gender and sex identification based on mitochondrial DNA. I don't know if you, well, as you know, mitochondrial DNA is passed on from the mother, right? So you only get your mother's mitochondrial DNA. Yeah. Well, not for mussels. They get male and female. And that is part of their sex determination system. Uh-huh. Weird, huh? And we're looking at this and we're like, why?
Right,
and
how is this?
Why? And I think this is a hypothesis, not tested, but my idea is why this might be adaptive is because if you are a female and you are on the most upstream end of your little neighborhood of mussels, you're not getting any love because sperm just goes downstream, right? That's the other thing. The males have some of the highest fertilization rates of anything. They have these, they don't just let go of little individual sperm into the water. The sperm hang together in little globules what they call spermatozoa, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
And they hang together, and they'll sort of swim all in the same direction and push downstream. And then they have some of the highest fertilization rates of any organism, which is pretty good, because you can imagine they don't have a very long lifespan in water. Fresh water is not a very friendly environment for that. So what if you're a female, and you're in the most upstream end, and there's nobody releasing any sperm upstream of you? Maybe you should be male then. And so we think that might have something to do with that, like having that mitochondrial activation.
Yeah. Being able to adapt. I think that's one of the craziest but coolest thing to me about different types of organisms is how they can change their sex, or the ones who are they can just reproduce. I think it's hard to wrap my head around, because I'm just how do you do that?
Well, when you think about it, producing viable offspring is the business end of evolution.
Yeah.
So that's where some of the most interesting adaptations can be found in terms of the animal world, and so it's kind of exciting and interesting. And for me, it's an important part of educating people too, because it captures their imagination. It makes them giggle, because sex. Woo. And as a biologist, it doesn't embarrass me. It's very hard to embarrass me. And at least in that way, it's not hard to embarrass me in other ways. But when talking about animal sex, does not embarrass me.
No biggie.
But you just get the most interesting stories, and it just captures people's imagination.
Mm-hmm.
That they think, oh well, this is much more complicated and interesting and weird than I thought it would be. And it is the business end of evolution. If we think about what the job is of our genes, or our combination of genes which make us, is this idea of survival and thriving. Of course, that's an important part of that, but that thriving must result in viable offspring. And so that is everything, in terms of what these animals are doing. So trying to understand those processes can give you a lot of idea of not only why they do what it is that they do, but how they got endangered, and what we can do to provide them with an environment where they can thrive, not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah.
And actually recover.
Yeah.
Because that is the ultimate goal. We don't want to just label something as endangered and then not doing anything about it.
Exactly. You want to be able to have that way to be able to help it just, again, like you said, thrive, and not just survive, because surviving is just it's just there. There's no progression going on.
That's right.
And that's what we need with endangered animals in order for them to get out of that stage of being endangered.
And so a lot of what I do is about that.
Yeah, and that's what I love to be able to talk and study about. I want to be able to understand the ways where they can help them just progress and thrive, because I don't want to have to see an animal that and be oh, this is so cute, and then someone go, oh, it's endangered. I'm just no, I don't want to see that. No. I don't want to see that. No. I don't want that title to be there. No. And a lot of these animals are just so important, you said, to the ecosystem. I mean, what do you think is going to happen if they die? What do you think is going to happen if bees die? Not good things.
Not good things.
Not good things at all.
Not good things.
And a lot of people just don't.
No, we don't.
They don't care, or they don't think about it.
Well, one of the things that the parallel that I like to draw with people is when it comes to the ecosystem services that we get from living on a living planet.
Yeah.
Whether it be a thriving soil biome, or a forest that produces animals, plants, oxygen, carbon sequestration. So we just think about all the things that animals do for us: food, clean water, all the stuff. And we think about how much we depend on those things. Let's think about one component of your life: your retirement investments. Would you think it would be wise to put all of your retirement savings into a single investment, like McDonald's?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. That would be kind of crazy, right? Because as McDonald's goes up and down in value, like stocks, as it goes up and down in value, then you're on a roller coaster ride of financial
you're just at a
boom
risk
and
the
bust.
whole time.
And what if somebody finds a finger in their French fries and then it just crashes? Something random could happen and it would be very bad. So, sorry, McDonald's. I don't think that would ever happen. But but these are things that we think about. So, it makes sense also that when it comes to ecosystem services, we need redundancy and diversity and in those things as part of being thriving human beings. This notion of it's either the endangered species or economic development or the endangered species or humans, that we have to make these stark choices. I think that is very simplistic and almost always wrong. And there are ways that we can manage our ecosystems more wisely. There's ways that we can build and work and be part of our watersheds and be part of these landscapes in a way that allows us to preserve those ecosystem services. And as such, those ecosystem services then provide tremendous benefits to communities and the well-being of the people that live in those watersheds. So there's a return for the investment into their conservation. So that's the other thing I try to think about, is how do we balance the needs of humans and human development and human landscapes with a natural landscape? Is there a way to find those two things to come together for mutual benefit? As such, I sort of step away from that idea of we have to stay away, we have to be not part of, we have to regulate ourselves to the point of no flexibility. I don't think that's necessarily sustainable in the long term. And it creates this idea of endangered species being the enemy of the humans that have to share their landscapes with them. When indeed it's quite the opposite. So that's a big part of what I do too, is trying to, and that's why I often work over landscapes and do landscape ecology, is because that's the nature of human impact on these systems. It's at the landscape level. And so understanding how these animal processes act on those landscapes and interact with human landscapes is one of the things that really interests me. And a lot of times we're making up for past mistakes.
That's also fair, but at least someone's doing it.
So I mean, and some of these
really counts.
I'm hoping we're going to see a lot of recovery really soon in a lot of mussel species, because the Endangered Species Act is 50 years old, Clean Water Act is 50 years old.
Oh wow!
And mussels live a long time. So their recovery is probably going to take a while. There was a lot of things that came back really quickly when we started the Clean Water Act. If you look at the history of that particular regulation, we had rivers that literally ran red with dyes and blood from factories and slaughterhouses. We had rivers that would light on fire because there's so much oil and chemicals that were in the water. So when you're in that situation, we've been a little bit spoiled for the last 50 years, and we don't necessarily have a memory of that, but our animals do. And so we're seeing some recovery of some animals. We're seeing improved practices outstream of dams. There's all sorts of things that are happening to improve the health of our aquatic ecosystems, and mussels might only be starting to catch up to the point where they are able to show a response to that. So part of what I try to do is study recovery as well as endangerment. So where are they doing well? Where could we be doing better? Could we help them along? Or is it best to just leave well enough alone and let them recover on their own? That's one of the big questions that we can ask. And the idea of doing research behind this stuff is not to necessarily tell managers what to do, but to keep them from flying blind while they do it. So I'm not going to advocate for one outcome or another. I'm not going to advocate for the Endangered Species Act or anything like that. The Endangered Species Act is a societal mandate. If you want to fulfill that mandate, then here's some stuff you can do.
Here's some examples.
And I'm going to leave you to it, and you can decide whether to do it or not do it based on maybe the larger picture that policyholders might have of all the conflicting things that are happening on the landscape. So that's, again, a big part of what I do when I'm advocating for these animals is I'll say, okay, here's what I think will be best for the animals. Here's how we can balance it with those human uses, and go. Now you guys can make your own decisions on what you do, and hopefully not make me cry when you make those decisions. Because I don't lie that I do love these animals, and a lot of what I do is out of love for these animals.
I mean, being in this field, you have to love these animals that you're dealing with, and again, it's a passion. I mean, for me, I'm not in marine biology just to be in marine biology. No, it's a passion. It's something that I want to see get better. I want to be able to see the improvements, and I want to be able to see life. I want to be able to see clean waters. I mean, oceans are really bad, obviously, with pollutions, but then there's, like you said, there's different waters that are really bad whenever it comes to, factories and, from dyes and, all this stuff. people get mad. Like, I see people sometimes not really mad, but annoyed whenever they go on break, and they're just like, oh, like, this beach looks gross or nasty, or like, oh, why is there so much trash? And I'm like, because of you. Like, yeah. It's because of y'all. Like, maybe not just specifically you, but it's just because of us as a society. We don't keep stuff clean as much anymore. And that's not just oceans. That's just, like, literally outside of tech, on the, like, in the parking lots. There's probably 3 Buc-ee's cups just on the ground. Yeah. Like, it's just, I feel like that's another thing. Just cleaning up, and factories are just another different topic to deal with. But just being able to pick up and clean, and that's why I love being able to see these people having those, like, beach cleanup days. Like, I love those, because it's like, you're not making it better just for you, but you're also making it better for the animals who live there. You're making it better for their actual homes that we've kind of hurt.
There's a lot of river cleanup programs.
There is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are wonderful programs, and they're great because they combine the physical cleanup of garbage, which is, and you can go in and volunteer with your local river cleanup, but it also provides an opportunity for education. So it's, take a biologist along with you whenever you go out and do stuff like that.
Take a biologist to work
day. Take one along to sort of take a biologist to work day to sort of say, well, this is what you're seeing over here. Teach you a few plants.
Look at the species.
And if you don't have a handy dandy biologist, there's a lot of books and apps and things like that you can take out with you. And
there's
like
those apps where it's like you just point the camera at a bug and it'll be telling you like, oh, this is what this bug is, and you can do the same with like different animals.
I wish I had those when I was, back in the day. I love that stuff.
I love them so much.
Some of my colleagues have bemoaned some of the new technologies, and I'm always like, really, that works? Cool, because I work on very diverse critters.
Yeah.
Though actually, I will tell you that one of the things about mussels is that we don't have any keys for them. Because they defy keys. Remember that, like, when you key an animal out, you ask a series of yes or no questions. Well, there's quite a few,
can't do that, really.
Maybe sort of kind of questions when you're only looking at the shell of the animal.
Yeah.
And it's the shell that you're using to identify the species. So there's a lot of internal features that you cannot see. Or you're dealing with just the skeleton, right, of the animal if it's dead, and you're opening the shell and you're looking at it. So there's some phenotypic plasticity in some of the features. So a lot of times the answer to a question to help you identify a species is, usually, but sometimes not. And, well, is it kind of heavy? Is it kind of heavy for the shell size based on your experience with shells in general? Then it might be this. You're asking general questions. Or if you hold up a freshwater mussel shell and you ask a malacologist that knows what they're doing, what is this? The first question they're going to ask you is not, what is it shaped like? What color it is? They're going to say, where are you? Because depending on where you are in the range of a species, it might look a little different. And so they're ridiculous. They don't behave. And they don't fit easily into keys. And when you try to use any of those apps to figure out what they are, that
they just like to keep you on your toes.
Like, yeah. So it's kind of interesting to be involved with identifying or being any kind of expert. Though I'd say I'm still learning a lot about mussel ID.
Yeah.
But to be able to teach people something that can only be done by shifting through thousands of shells and just exposure and taking time with it. There's really no technological shortcut for it. So maybe that's why I'm comfortable with technology, because I don't feel threatened by it. But I also think that, the potential there is really exciting.
Yeah.
And it's really fun to sort of put again, I was into paleontology when I was a kid. So sitting down with a box of shells and shifting through them and finding what makes this one slightly different from this one and get a sense of where that's kind of, for me, that's fun. And yes,
that's your playground.
It makes me a weirdo, but I do enjoy it very much. So anytime you want to come and hang out in the malacology collection, or if any biology student wants to come and see it, they're more than welcome. I'd love to show it to anyone who wants to see, and just give them a sense of how lucky we are to be where we are.
Yeah.
Because if we were in Oregon, or in California, or in Washington, which is so famous for its fish, we'd be lucky to get 2, maybe 3 species of mussel. Here we can get hundreds. That's
so crazy.
Yeah, you can get 80 some odd species in a single river system.
Yeah.
So, you'd have to look really thoroughly for some of the river systems, but I teach in my malacology class 72 species, and I want my students to learn 72 species, and these are species that are easily found in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And in Oregon, there would literally be 3. So,
well, I guess Oregon has easier classes.
They don't have any malacology classes at all. One of my master's students is working out there with a invertebrate program.
Okay.
He just moved to Portland.
Yeah.
One of my former graduate students, he's graduated, obviously, and he's working with Xerxes, which is a great program for honeybees and invertebrate conservation in general. And they're trying to increase awareness of the needs of mussel communities out west, because their mussels are still ecologically and important, ecosystem important. They don't have the endangerment and diversity they do out here, but they're still really integral parts of aquatic ecosystems. And just trying to raise awareness of people who are really focused on salmon and salmon recovery. That hey, there's other components of the biological community too, and these guys are important as well. You really have to sort of shout to the rooftops, whereas here where they are really special and there are a lot that are listed, it's maybe a little bit easier to raise awareness about them. But in both cases, they're really, really important. Part of the reason why the Appalachians and in general the Southeast is a hotbed of biodiversity is because of glaciers. We didn't get glaciered out. We have a lot of east-west flowing systems, so when the glaciers did melt, it didn't flood into those areas. If you have a north-south flowing system, then it's going to get flooded out a lot more. So it's like you get these little pockets of where it's holding you in and keeping you nice and warm and safe. And we also have weather that comes up from the Gulf that moderates climate change. So it doesn't completely eliminate it, but it sort of makes it a little gentler. So this is truly like a cradle. It's like a very special place where animals can thrive and diversify and change. And up in the Pacific Northwest, that's called the Ring of Fire because of volcanoes and glaciers and all sorts of things happened up there. So they don't have that level of stability that has led to the diversity that we have here. So that's part of what makes Tennessee cool.
That's true.
Yes. So I'm glad you're here.
Oh, I'm glad you're here.
Even if you end up working in Hawaii or the Bahamas on marine animals, though Hawaii and the Bahamas have some really cool terrestrial and freshwater organisms as well.
They do. They really do. But I do love.
Oh, I understand.
I say how much I'm like ready to leave whenever I graduate, like Tennessee as a state. But like I do love Tennessee because one, we got Dolly Parton, but that's besides the point.
Oh wow.
2.
Probably be her name.
Exactly. 2 is just again the nature of Tennessee. There's just so much to just see and explore and to learn about, especially when it comes to like different types of species and animals and plants, and it's just so cool to me. Like this is a place for nature loving people to be at, and people like me who want to be able to just learn about the more kind of, because I could have gone to like Western Florida University and been able to have all my classes there. One, they're literally expensive, but that's besides the point. But like I could have gone there and learned kind of what I need to be learning, just like actual marine biology and everything. But then I could also go to Texas A&M and do zoology there. And then like here I'm able to do what I want to do as well, but I'm also able to like learn more about the more like out of focused kind of species that you don't think about. And that's kind of, again, like what you're doing. I just think that's so cool because that is as important as being able to learn about elephants and rhinos and giraffes. Like, they're all important. One, in my opinion, one is not as, like, is better than the other. I think almost all animals are equal, and being able to learn them and being able to just dive in and help them is just so, like, fascinating to me.
If you can bring in that, and if you can bring in that broad understanding that you have from working in other systems, then you're going to have a unique perspective. Yeah. That someone who, has been in the same system for a really long time may not be able to bring. Yeah. And so it might give you ideas and approaches that you would otherwise not have. Or know about. Yeah. And so having that diversity of experience in your team as part of the research team, I think is really important. Mm-hmm. I used to work in Alaska for 6 years, and I worked in Idaho for a long time. Oh, dude, it's an experience. So bad. My uncle lives up there. Big place, big experience. Yes. And coming from, I joke, I call the salmonosphere, so wherever I was working on salmonids.
Yeah.
And moving back out east, because I did get my PhD in Virginia, so I started out in the East Coast, and then I ran over for my early career. But coming back with that experience gave me some ideas and perspective I'm quite sure I would not have had otherwise. And so I definitely encourage students to enjoy their place wherever it may be.
Yeah,
and
just
then
be
wherever
able
they
to,
end up, bring that with them.
Do as much as you possibly can with where you are and with what you have. That's
Absolutely.
one thing that I have been making sure that I do myself, because even though this might be a dry land kind of state, I can still do stuff. I just have to find where to go and just push for it. That's all I gotta do. I can't just sit here and be like, oh no, I'm not
my favorite
where
critter.
I want to be. No, there's still different animals and there's different just programs that I can learn and study in. So be able to just go.
And
that
those
knowledge,
tools apply.
learn.
So you're learning genetic tools. You're learning the research process. You're learning, you're learning how to collect and preserve data and get all of that work done in a way that where you can maintain scientific rigor and ask those sorts of questions. Those sorts of skills are sometimes harder to obtain than the skills that you learn from having a sense of place.
Yeah.
So I have lived in Tennessee. I've been at Tennessee Tech now for 5 years. So I've learned these muscles of Tennessee in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd asked me what the difference was between two species in Tennessee, even when I was in Missouri, I would have been lost. I would have been like, I don't know, that one's slightly rounder than that one. I don't know.
This one's different color.
Yeah, so I had to learn things as I went along. But what I didn't have to relearn is the research process. I didn't have to relearn how to write and communicate in science, or how to mentor students, or what kind of tools are best applied to these different situations, and what kind of questions do I need to ask about the quality of data and how to put it together. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can be a good student for where you want to be.
Exactly.
And that's what I try to tell my students.
I love
all
that
the time.
quote. We have to stick that on my fridge.
We'll
somewhere.
keep it there. Keep your manifesting poster up with your whale shark. But in the meantime, there's a lot of steps that can take you there anywhere you land, anywhere you want to be.
Yes.
And I don't blame you. Whale sharks are cool as anything. I mean, they're amazing.
I love them.
They're really cool. So and I love anything that basically spends its entire life with its mouth wide open. You gotta love that. Have you seen paddlefish in the Chattanooga Aquarium? Yeah, they're always looking as they're swimming around. I can't help it when I watch them swimming. I just want to I want to yell with them. But what they're doing is
screaming.
They look like they're screaming, but they're really just having dinner. But with that filter feeding stuff, it's pretty darn cool. And I study filter feeders, so I have a lot of love for animals that eat small things. So, so yeah, it's so wherever you want to be, you're learning the skills that you need to learn.
So, speaking about animals,
mm-hmm.
this comes to my pretty much last question, but it's a fun question, and it's the question that I kind of told you about earlier, and I tell this to everybody, whoever is with me, my guests, but what is your favorite animal? And I know you already told me the answer, but if you want to tell me again, do you want to work with them?
No. Okay, so it depends on what you mean by favorite animal, because there are my favorite animals to study,
mm-hmm.
and there's my favorite fish and my favorite blah blah.
Got you.
So I have lots of favorites.
Okay.
It's really hard to nail down one, but there is an animal that I have the highest human affinity to.
Yeah.
That I watch and I lose my mind with joy, and that would be river otters. Not sea otters.
Oh, I do love river otters.
I do love sea otters. They're cute. Well, but they can be a little mean to each other and to humans. River otters are
cute.
Wonderful animals. They and I want to be reincarnated as one because I mean, I think it's a pretty good life. They play.
They do.
They slide.
Yes.
They play some more.
Yeah.
They are great swimmers.
Mm-hmm.
Much better swimmers than I could ever be. They eat sushi.
Oh, so good.
And they make more otters. And that just doesn't sound like a bad life.
It sounds like a cute life.
Yeah. And they, they talk and they mess with each other and
They're
they live
so
in.
cute.
They're very social. And yes, I can sit and watch them for hours. And I had a student who was working in the Hatchie River system, and she sent me a video, and she's like, "Look at this," and I was really, and I thought, "Oh gosh, is there something going on with research?"
Yeah.
And I thought it was business, and I'm looking at this video, and I'm like, "What's happening with the river? What's happening with the river? And what's her question about? And then suddenly I see a little bloop, and there's an otter like sliding into the river, and then of course I'm watching it, and I just go and my students know me very well. They know what makes me happy. So they're like, no.
It's always good whenever the students know their professors.
Yeah, it is. I do have a real weakness for them, and whenever I go to the Chattanooga Aquarium and get a chance to see them, or go to any zoo where they are, or I ever have
that's like
a
first
glorious
stop
chance
right
to see them in the wild, I can just sit there for hours and just watch them because they're just so lovely.
I love
that. Yeah, I absolutely love otters, and no, I would not study them. I might be interested in their impact on fish communities and crayfish communities in the sense of predation can be a really important can play a really important ecological role on how animals distribute themselves in systems, how they use habitat. So in that sense, they're very fascinating. However, when you study the behavior and biology of an animal, you have to study their entire life cycle, including their untimely demise at times, or their death, or their suffering.
See that.
And I'm not sure I could bear it.
Oh.
I just have a very tender heart when it comes to mammals. That's part of the reason I think I just study the slimy kinds that
instead of the furry kinds.
Yeah, and mussels which aren't particularly cute. They don't even have eyeballs. Mussels don't even have eyeballs. So like that kind of keeps you from or vocal cords or anything like that.
We just need to get some like signs up being like save the mussels.
Save them. We're people too. No, they're not. They're rocks with snot, but they're very important rocks with snot. And they are very complicated and interesting, and they do really complex things for an animal that only has a neural net.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of photosensitive cells. But that's about it. And yet they have these really complex life histories. Mollusks are cool. Yeah. They do. I mean, when you think about it, the smartest invertebrates are also mollusks, are octopi and squid.
Oh, yeah.
So octopi and squid are in the same general group with animals that only have a neural net. So they might be able to teach us a lot about what is intelligence and how does it evolve and why is it important and why have eyeballs? Because the eyeballs that these animals have are very different from our own. Yeah. Yet there are commonalities as well. So I think just having this diversity of life on planet can teach us a lot about ourselves and where we go. And so for that reason, I'm perfectly happy to study any number of exciting, wonderful organisms. But just probably not otters. Because, well, not otters alone.
Yeah.
Though, honestly, if someone came to me and said, I have an otter project for you, I'd probably go for it just because I couldn't help myself. But I might suffer a bit if I have to watch any of those animals suffer. Because I am a little tender-hearted, what can I say? But I think they're pretty cool. And otters are also, like, muskrats in particular, and otters are predators on mussels as well.
Well, I hope in the nicest way that you never have to work with otters. I hope you're able to just
hang with them,
see them,
bond with them.
Yeah.
Perhaps adopt one of my very own.
Perhaps.
No, I won't do that. It's not good to adopt one.
Get one of those like adopt an otter bracelets.
I have a few stuffed ones at home. Perhaps.
Oh, well, maybe. See, that's all that matters. Yeah. You know, that's as close as.
Still need to get a tattoo though. That's one of those tattoos I need to get. Yeah. I haven't gotten an otter tattoo yet.
I would
might be on my bucket list.
See that. I would love to see that.
So yeah, I love them, and of course dinosaurs. But that's because I'm still free at heart.
Just like the movie Jurassic Park.
No, yeah, well.
My sister like loves those movies, and I'm just like, is it just because you like really love dinosaurs?
Well, I always kind of like love movies where ignoring the scientist at the beginning is what leads to disaster. Because I'm like, see, guys, you should listen to us.
Yeah,
we have good things to say sometimes, you know.
Common sense.
Common sense, that's right.
Well, before we end our podcast, is there anything else that you would like to talk about or say?
Well, do right by your rivers and streams. And remember that although Tennessee is water-rich compared to a lot of our western neighbors, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't conserve and pay attention to our water. Something you should never, ever take for granted. And as a student here, I would encourage you to take advantage of the many, many people in the biology department, and in the engineering department, and in the environmental studies department whose entire research program is centered around water and the organisms that live in them. And don't flip burgers anymore. Work in your field. Work in your field. No more retail. No more food service unless you absolutely have to, for which I understand. There's a lot of people that are sort of stuck because they have to work their way through school and they need, need to pay for the basics. But do everything you can to get that research experience and get paid for it if you can. And start working in your field. Start building that career. It's not too late. And if you're interested in the biology career and research, your next path will be graduate school. Yeah. And to get into graduate school, you not only need that GPA, but you also need that experience in research and writing and communication and all that sort of stuff. So it's important to realize that these conversations, doing this kind of outreach, being involved in people's labs and doing really cool stuff, that is all part of building your education. I love talking to you, Michaela, and I'm really proud of what you're doing. You're on the right track. And if you need to look at your CV or resume as you keep going forward, let me know.
I plan on doing a couple more research projects with different professors because I just want to be able to get that. One thing about me is that I like to be able to do everything. Like, I like to be able to have just different things that I do. And I've already knocked out, like, job-wise, I've already knocked out, fast food. I don't want to go to retail, so I'm not going to do that. But currently, another part of, like, what I want to do is I want to be able to be a journalist for, like, endangered animals and be able to, like, write about them and do research on them, be able to study them and all that stuff and be able, like, to publish that. And right now, one, to be able to advocate and, like, learn about them. That's why I have this podcast, is to be able to talk to people like you and professors like you who know all about this, like, all these different organisms that I don't know about. So being able to, like, hear you talk, I'm being informed as well as the audience. And I'm also, like, a part of Yearbook, and I'm a part of this podcast place called Cookville Now, and they have, like, a newspaper, they have, like, a newspaper, like, office facility that they have, and it's, like, for different newspaper companies around Tennessee or, like, Georgia. And so I work with them with that so that I can have that kind of experience with doing data entries and, like, filing and kind of getting that, like,
that sounds like a very
critical skills going. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very transferable skill.
Yeah, and then I also work at, like, the Stonecomb radio station. Right now with that, I do a lot of just outreaching and, like, promotions and stuff. But I like to just be able to be a little bit of everywhere just so that I can have a lot of those skills and try to, like, just build them up. And right now, again, I do the research, and so I'm just trying to do more with it because I don't want to be falling behind, and I want to be able to just have those stepping stones. Plus, I mean, it looks good on the resumes, and it helps you to be able to go further into your career with being able to have this stuff on your resume.
And I hope it'll help you find what drives you. Like, what is it that you're willing to stay up till 3 a.m.
And that's doing? Like what I'm still trying to figure out myself, because I changed my major. I changed it, like, a couple of a semester ago. Because, again, I wanted to be a vet at first, and then I was like, I don't want to do that, and so then I went to zoology, but I was like, but I really love the water. I'm terrified of the water.
Well, it's good to have a healthy respect for it.
Yeah, it is.
It can be quite dangerous.
And that's what I love about it, is, like, I'm so terrified of it, but, like, it just intrigues me. Mm-hmm. And I told this to my friend Hannah on my other podcast episode. It's like, to me, I think being able to explore the ocean is, like, so much cooler to me personally than exploring, like, the land or, like, space. Like, I'm sorry.
Well, we know more about space than we do about the ocean.
Exactly.
Presently,
so that's why it's like,
because it's such a difficult environment to work in, and it's such a dangerous environment, and high pressure, and no light.
That's true.
And so much of what we
except for those, like, scary fish.
Yeah,
that are,
which
like,
I think are really cool. Do you know the story of the anglerfish?
I do not, but I know the movies Finding Nemo, Finding Dory.
Well, did you know that the Finding Nemo anglerfish was definitely a female?
Oh.
Because the females get quite large, and they have the little esca and ilium, which is their little lure that they have on their head. They have those giant maws, so that anything that comes down from the ocean, from the top, that filters down to the relative productivity desert that is the bottom of the ocean, they can actually get their mouths around. Like, they're not limited by their gape size.
That's crazy.
But it's a productivity desert being down in the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
So why waste all that food on a male that can, makes a lot of sperm with, not as much effort as it takes to make an egg. One single sperm. Now there is tissue investment in making sperm, so both males and females have tissue investment, but maybe it's better to just, if you find your mate, stick with her. So what the males do is they're basically born out of an egg, and they never eat. They just have these big sensory organs on the top of their head, and those sensory organs help them sense out a female. Mm-hmm. So they have very strong pheromones. They'll find a little female, they will start to nibble at her, and then their mouths and head melts and fuses onto the female, and they become a parasite on the female. And you can sometimes find an anglerfish with several male parasites on her, and they just provide sperm when called upon to do, and they lose all other external features.
That's...
If you live in a desert and you find a girl, you better stick with her.
I'm gonna look that up after this. That's terrifying, but that's like so.
If you want some really fun science communication out there, there's sort of well, no, you can talk to me and I'll tell you stories, but there's a wonderful YouTube entertainer, and some of his humor is a little ribald, a little adult, but if you don't mind some language and some spiciness, that's really quite mild, I think. He does what are called True Facts.
Okay.
A True Facts series. His True Facts about the anglerfish was one of my favorites, and he talks about what happens with the male, and and he shows how ugly anglerfish can be, and it's quite amusing. But he also has a True Facts about freshwater mussels.
Oh, okay.
That's wonderful, and it's about. There's a commercial in the middle of it, which I'm not fond of, but I understand why he has to do it. He has to make his money.
That's true.
But it's about 7 minutes explanation of the reproductive life history of mussels, and it's one of the best summaries I've ever seen. It is scientifically accurate what he does, but he tells the story in a really entertaining and fun way, and it's hilarious. So I do recommend you watch those. And his True Facts about the anglerfish is really funny. Mm-hmm. There's also an oatmeal cartoon, and I don't know if you're familiar with oatmeal comics. He does comic strips, and occasionally he'll do some animation, but mostly comic strips. He has one that's called How the Male Anglerfish Gets Completely Screwed. And it's the whole story of the anglerfish, the male anglerfish, and he tells the story in a very amusing and funny way with lots of great drawings and things like that, so it's quite hilarious. I highly recommend both entertaining things, and I think that as someone who's a science communicator, who's interested in science communication, it's really important to be able to tell your stories in a way that is understandable and entertaining and accessible.
But also very intriguing and exciting for the other person, because
make it relevant to them.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people who, whenever we watch those documentaries in the science classrooms in high school, with the monotone man talking like this the whole time, who wants to listen to that? Nobody. But then you get someone who's throwing in some fun little jokes, I think is it Hank Green? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like him, for example, his crash courses that he does, they're super just involving, and they're so fun to watch, and they're super cool because of all his comics and everything. I think being able to just that's one thing that I want to do is I want to be able to advocate and talk about animals, but I also want to do it in a manner where it's fun and interesting for people to keep along and actually listen to me, even if they don't care about what I'm saying. Then maybe at the end of what I'm saying, they'll care a little bit more about.
Absolutely, and if there's some people that are more clever at it than others, but
yeah, for sure,
storytelling is a big part of science. So I'm really glad that you're learning those skills, because when you can tell a good story, you can get people interested, and it helps people understand your science and apply it forward. Yeah. If you do your science in a vacuum, it's not science. science is only science once it's communicated.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just something that happened.
Yeah.
So getting those skills and putting those into practice, I think, is an important part of being a scientist, as well as a science journalist. So whether you go into science journalism or you go into science, you're learning important skills that you're going to need, whether you go into research or into journalism. Or, if you find yourself crossing over, like I am today, like I do communication and science outreach as often as I can, even though it's only a component of my job. So having these kinds of experiences at the very beginning is so important. And if I didn't communicate what I did, then, I'd just be up in my office doing stuff, and nobody would know what I was up to. So that's why communication is so key. And it's not just producing papers, it's also doing podcasts, giving talks, going to managers and talking to them about the work that we do. So it's all part of that whole thing. So I guess that's a long statement on all the things I want you to do. All this stuff and love your rivers.
Okay, sounds good. I'll get back to you.
And come and see me anytime.
Oh yeah, I plan on it, honestly, in the future. You're so interesting to me, and I just love being able to hear about it. But again, thank you for being on this with me. I appreciate you being able to come and bring you you're such a fun little happy vibe to be around, and I love that. And I just love being able to hear you talk about all your different niches and what you love to study and talk about, and all this interesting facts about the angler. That's just I'm sorry, that's still kind of baffles me. But
I appreciate you listening.
No, of course, I love listening to people talk whenever it comes to biology. I don't care what department or field you are in biology, or biology itself. I don't care what you're in. If you're just passionate about it and you're gonna talk to me about it, I will listen 100%, because I'm always interested in hearing all about different parts of just the field, because there's so much to it, and I'm not gonna know it unless somebody tells me about it. So
Great. That's great.
Of course. But again, thank you for being here, and thank y'all for watching and listening to my podcast. I am your host, Michaela.
I'm Amanda.
And I'll see you next time. Buzz out.